a goal should be achievable, or at least if you're going to set a high goal like that, what are you going to do differently to achieve that? Are you going to double your number of hours? Something insane that you probably shouldn't do. But are you going to do something? Or are you going to change your methods?
Learning to swim is about learning from others. Be the author of your own story, not a character in somebody else's story. Get inspired by others to take action. Learn how to set goals to exceed your own expectations. So often the answer that you are looking for is right in front of you. On Learning to Swim, we highlight those answers through storytelling. Welcome. My guest today at Learning to Swim is Jonathan Williams, and I'm so delighted to have Jonathan today share his thoughts about work and his professional life. And we originally met through LinkedIn. We are still in the time of COVID, and so LinkedIn has been this incredible place to meet really interesting people. And so Jonathan currently has a company where he is a ghostwriter, and we'll get into that a little bit more because it's so much more than just about him writing some words that are applied to someone else's name. So I want to dig into that. But a little background on Jonathan. He was born and raised in the Washington, D.C. area. He currently lives in sunny Utah. Yes, it is winter and it's freezing cold right now. So thus the bundled up. You did your undergrad work at BYU and got a degree in poli-sci. You did a mission in Japan, and you actually speak Japanese, which I think is amazing. I am so unilingual, it's horrible. And you also have a master's from the University of Utah, and you started doing some technical writing as a consultant. You also had another consulting business. You are happily married with 2 children, and welcome to Learning to Swim.
Thank you. I can't wait to hear what the questions will be.
I know, right? So that's the format. We are just doing a very informal, conversational type of interview. My guests do not see the questions ahead of time because I want it to be a very spontaneous response, and we won't hold you to any of these things. You can, this is a moment in time. So let's jump right in. And our first question is really about resilience. And what does resilience mean to you? And what does it possibly look like in your own life?
Sure. I guess, apart from just the dictionary definition of resilience, which means you take a licking and keep on ticking, as the old Timex commercial would say, is that you, like every human being on this earth, have challenges that you face or bad experiences, whether they be at home or at work or at school or they medical. And then if you get knocked down, if you're resilient, you'll come back and eventually end up going back at your normal speed again. To me, that's what resilience means. I think we all face adversity. Resilience means doesn't mean you never get, to me, that you never get knocked down or slowed down or depressed. It just means that you eventually keep trying to find your way back to whatever normal is.
Yeah, absolutely. So along the same lines, what does failure look like to you?
Yeah, I think failure means you executed, in my book, you executed a plan, you attempted to do something, and it just didn't work out. Now, that doesn't mean that you didn't learn something or that you didn't grow from it, but it does mean that what you were the deliverable you're trying to produce, say, if you want to put it in business terms, didn't materialize or didn't happen, or it didn't work out quite the way you hoped it would. A few years ago, when I was back in the DC area, while I was working as a tech writer, I had so many people say, you got a really nice voice. You should do something with that. And I thought, sure, why not? And so I signed up for a seminar on voiceover, had to pay a little money. And I ended up hiring somebody to help me put together demos. And I sent the demos out. And I even got a few gigs, not a lot of gigs, but I got a few. And one of the gigs I got was narrating a TV show for the Learning Channel, when it used to be more about learning and less about large people. And it was an awful experience. Nothing against the Learning Channel, but I was in a studio at Discovery.com's headquarters in Bethesda at the time. and was patched into a guy over in England who was directing me through a script that I hadn't seen before, about the Wright brothers. And I read it, and every time he'd want me to do it again and again and again. And of course, instead of giving him better reads, the reads generally got more tired, or it got more stressed. And so the
Right.
gal who was there kind of directing me on my side said, just have confidence in your read. So I tried to. We soldiered through it. And I've got a video, a VHS kicking around here since this is back in '03. And my wife said, I never knew about this. How come you never told me about this? And that kind of why are you hiding from me kind of thing. And she knew I'd done some voice work, I guess. But I said, well, just was never that proud of it. And I think I lost track of it. She goes, well, then throw it out. I said, well, our son wants to see it, so I'll show it to him at some point. I said, but the narration just isn't that good. And that was that whole experience. And then just doing voiceover work, it was so hard to market myself. I never felt like I got traction. Now, I had other gigs that went a lot better, and I had one other one that went almost as bad as that one. But I just thought, I think I'm failing here, and it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so I gave up. And my wallet thanks me, because I spent money on demos and I spent time trying to do all this. And I found out that reading a script was so much harder than I thought it was going to be. And delivering something the way somebody wants you to deliver it was so much harder, than I expected. Could I have ever finally succeeded? I don't know, but at what cost to my psyche? I don't know. So
Yeah.
I'm happy to have failed at it, because it doesn't mean I could never do it. In fact, I had a job later where I had to narrate some lessons we were putting together. And I did okay at that, because that was so much easier. I didn't have somebody breathing down my throat at that point. And I had the best voice in the room, so it was good. It was fine. But doing it professionally was so much tougher, so much harder than I realized. And then anytime I would try to audition for something and I'd send off a little snippet, I figured I was probably one of 50 people who were auditioning for these gigs. And so I never quite figured it out. I failed at it, but I learned and I grew, and I learned that maybe my time was, at that point in my life at least, was better spent somewhere else. So,
Yeah.
That's what failure means to me. It means you learn something and maybe something didn't quite work out. Maybe you try it again later. Maybe you go, you know what, I'm done with that. It doesn't matter. Either way, it's okay. It's your decision.
Absolutely. And I think that's, as you mentioned, I think so much about failure is the learning process, right? And being willing to kind of revisit it with an eye for what is the information that I've gained from this. And I think a lot of times it's almost easier when, particularly in this world where there's so many choices and so much information, and the kind of the paradox of choice, right? That um, I find for myself that it has been there. Sometimes it's a better place to start is kind of finding out stuff that I don't want to do or that
Mm-hmm.
isn't a good fit, and then that can kind of steer me in the right direction. Um,
Every
so
no brings you closer to another yes, as they say in sales, so
It's true. Yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah.
I think it is. Well, I love what Malcolm Gladwell says about cliches, right? He says that these are truths that we essentially keep choosing to ignore.
Mm,
And
interesting.
I think it's so true. The other thing that I think is really in my own experience, and I'm curious to around kind of how you go through that process of, I find that that examination piece, that willingness to look at stuff. I created this journal several years back to it's around this concept of the art of discernment, right? So getting curious with your own experiences and getting some sense of what's working for you and what's not working for you. Do you have any sort of do you have a litmus test, or is there a practice that you do? Do you I mean, we're still kind of towards the beginning of the year. Do you do kind of a year end reflection or a year beginning intention? What does all
Yeah,
that look like?
I wrote a post about this on LinkedIn not long back before the end of the year, and I said, I don't believe in years. And I was basically saying that it seems like an artificial construct to me. And I was wondering, why do we have to celebrate the number change on a calendar? Because often things happen irrespective of the January 1st date. We're in a pandemic right now. And while it may not be as bad as it was, it's not going to end at sometime in the middle of a year. I mean, if it's not this year, it'd be next year. I don't know. But and I respect that other people like to set goals for a new year and try to turn over a leaf at the new year. And I think I'm all for that. I don't have a formal process where I do that, but I do have a list of things I'd like written down on my wall here behind, the camera there and my end. And I do try to set goals. And so I do try to have kind of a plan. I know what I want to do. And my secret, it's not really much of a secret, is to keep them realistic, although I have some big ones out there that are going to take years to achieve. But I try to keep it measurable, and I try to make them based on some kind of reality. We were, when I was a missionary, we would set goals for how many people we would try to bring into the church, and we would do it according to our little group of, missionaries. And I remember I was a fairly new missionary, and our zone, it was called a zone, our zone leader said, we're going to do 30 baptisms this month here in the city of Naha in Okinawa. And I thought, well, that's great. Did you just pull that number out of the air? I didn't say this out loud, of course, but I thought in my mind, they put 30 out there because it sounded like an inspiring number, and it was a lot higher than they'd ever done before. They'd done 5, 7, maybe 10 one month. I don't know. But I thought, we're going to get 30 because we set 30 out there, and we're going to get it because we set 30 as our goal. And I just thought, that's nonsense. What if there aren't 30 people out there who are ready? I don't understand that. Now, if that inspires you to work harder, to set a high goal, I get it. But a goal should be achievable, or at least if you're going to set a high goal like that, what are you going to do differently to achieve that? Are you going to double your number of hours? Something insane that you probably shouldn't do. But are you going to do something? Or are you going to change your methods? So goals like that drive me crazy. And of course, missions are full of terrestrial people trying to do a celestial work, right? And so we're humans, and we're using the best we can to motivate 19 and 20-year-old young men to work a little harder. So I get that. Of course, we didn't reach 30, in that month. And I wasn't surprised. And it wasn't because people didn't try. It was because it was a goal that existed in outer space, as far as I was concerned,
Right.
So I try to have realistic goals. I believe in setting goals. But I try to keep moving forward. And then to your question about discernment, my religion talks about discernment, and I'm not going to get into a religious discussion about that, but we believe that, you need to listen to good voices, whether they're in real life or whether they're coming through your heart or your spirit or whatever. And that sometimes you have to quiet things down in order to discern whether something is a right choice or someone is a right choice for you to partner up with for life or for business or, on a project. And it's a noisy world. And so it's easy to forget to listen. And so discernment, I think, starts when you start to listen, and you have to quiet down, whether it's through meditation or taking time out, every day. But discernment can happen in the midst of things, but it also needs to happen, or also needs quiet in order to happen.
Oh, I would agree with you 100% on the just even, some stillness, some quiet. And it really is, I think, my inspiration around thinking about it as a more formal practice or regular practice was really, to create some spaciousness for myself, and then, other people who think it sounds like a good idea to around just, to however you kind of hit pause, so that, because there is just this bombardment of images and actual noise and just our phones chirping at us all day long. So yeah, I love what you say about that. Talk to me a little bit about I think that it's so I want to circle back to what you said about when you are setting a goal that is perhaps in the coaching world we would call it maybe a stretch goal or something that is perhaps bigger than what you've done in the past, and you brought up the idea of what are you going to do differently.
I'll keep talking. Yeah. So in my business, the main challenge is finding leads and closing leads. So finding clients and bringing them along and converting them to, prospects into clients, whatever, the typical sales journey. And so what I've done there is I'm not going to find more if I don't do something different or if I don't try something new. So for me, it ends up being trying something new. So I tried something new lately with connecting with somebody who started a LinkedIn direct messaging campaign, outreach campaign. And I've connected with a few people, and I've taken some of his advice on ways to step them into, becoming closer to becoming clients or becoming clients. And I think it's good. What I realized in my particular case is his methods are good and the tips he's given me will help. But I think what I need to do in this case is not just go after clients. I've discovered just through thinking about it is that I need to go after, if you will.
Say that again. You need to go after
and
what?
that referral sources. In other words, a golden goose, somebody who can refer me clients over and over again.
Right.
And those are going to be a little harder to find. But until you find those, you're not really going to be getting the level you want. At least that's what I think in my case. And so I've started to define who those are. And so instead of just going after clients, because clients are kind of, not always, but they can be a one-off. They'll write their book and I'm done. I wrote my book in my life. And it'll be 10 years before I write another one, and that's fine. But if I find somebody who's a referral source, then I've found somebody who routinely comes across people for whom writing a book makes sense. And when they get to that point, they can refer them to me. And so I need to have a few dozen of those people all working, because you're going to need more than one, obviously. But I need a few dozen of those working in order to really start building repeatable kind of residual stream of business. This is something this is a conclusion I didn't come to until I'd already tried a few other methods and until I'd already tried just looking for, clients. And then it dawned on me, you could go even better, because one of the people I met with had mentioned partnering together and helping him in his business. And I got excited. And he said, and yeah, I need to write a couple of books. And I was excited about that too, but I was more excited about partnering with him because that to me meant ongoing, not just a one-time gig or job, And so a lot of businesses need to look at where they're getting their clients and customers from. Is there a source that keeps giving or that keeps working out, or it's a demographic that keeps working out, or is there a particular referral source or something, and apply that, and go that direction in order to, next level. I need to be busier in a good way, because this is not a scalable business that I'm in unless you want to become a supervisor of a bunch of junior writers, and I'm not ready or really want to do that. So in order to get busier and to get more clients, I need to find several potential referral sources, because they're not all going to fire at the same time. They're not all going to, strike gold at the same time. But I need to do that, if that makes sense. And so it's about process. It's about maybe a little bit of failure, because this marketing effort has worked out, but it hasn't worked out quite as good as I'd hoped. And I thought, do I abandon it or do I refine it? And I've decided to refine it, to find something that's going to be a little more valuable. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, a lot of times, because I work with clients and I have the 4 S's of success, which is, and so it's all about systems and structure and strategy and space. And so, with systems, one of the big things that, we always are talking about, clients and I, is that so when you implement a new system, there is, this moment where you have to let it do its thing in order to get the valuable bits of data back, so then you can do the refinement, or
Hmm.
or you completely, or maybe you get enough information that says this is definitely the wrong way to go.
Right.
But there does have to be, right, you have to have you've got to let it run its course for a little
Hmm.
while. And I find that that can be really hard on a lot of my clients, because they are at the point that they reach out to me, they're usually pretty frustrated. So there's not a lot of patience. But I totally hear what you're saying, that there is, that, as you kind of, there's just more information will be revealed as you kind of get into it. So I love that.
Yeah, they want
Well,
results now,
yeah.
understandably.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yesterday.
And
Yesterday.
I'm with them. I understand. I feel that way too sometimes. Yep.
Exactly. Well, I am a huge reader. I love reading. And so, one of the favorite questions that I always ask my guests is if they could think back to their childhood and think of a favorite book or story that was either read to them or something that you read as a young person. And is there a book or story that comes to mind for you?
I'm going to be embarrassed to say this, but the only title that comes to mind right off the top, and there's a couple more that I don't remember the titles to, was Where the Red Fern Grows. I remember it being kind of a sentimental
Mm,
book about a couple of hunting dogs. I could care less about hunting. I'm not much of a redneck. I don't, but when I was a kid, it was well written. It drew you in, and you really empathized or sympathized with the character, the main character, and with the stuff that was going on. And then my mother read me several other books um, about dogs, and then the other topic was about. I remember reading one about. I think it was about this Southern boy who was uh, living through the Civil War. It was
mm,
really interesting,
mm.
and then there was another one where a boy was trying to escape some Indians. I don't know if it's. Don't think that was the same book. So I don't remember those titles. I do remember the title Red Fern Grows because, of course, it's a
Oh
pretty
my gosh, I
famous title.
love that book.
Yeah,
That
it's a
book is
well-written book.
just, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, you just cry, cry, cry.
Yes.
And
Yes.
oh, it's so good. And so I know what I kind of think one of the lessons of that story is. I kind of hate the word lesson, but
You're right.
kind of one, but what was your takeaway from that book?
That's a good question. It's been so long, and since I would have to think about it more, but I think they were that even though something bad can happen, you're still right to have loved something, even if it later gets lost, because in the end, we're all going to get lost at some point. We're all going to perish, right? We're all going to die.
Yeah,
And I guess the other idea was that there was two dogs, and one was stronger than the other, but the other was smarter. It was two, it was a teamwork kind of thing. I think that was
right.
part of the lesson there too. But yeah, that would be what I could pull from it all these years later.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I would concur. So thinking about books currently, is there a book that you're reading or that you have read recently that you would recommend to folks? And it could be
So
fiction, nonfiction,
yeah,
whatever.
yeah. No, I'll jump ahead a little bit in time to when I was a teenager, and then I'll jump to the present because I don't want to miss this book. It's Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, and I read it again every once in a while, or at least parts of it again, because I forget the good lessons that are in it, and I don't necessarily think I have to apply every technique he uses, but I just love how hopeful the book is, how well written it is, how great the stories are, and I've got an original, not an original edition, but it's an early edition such that it hasn't been updated, because the stories are way out of date as far as who they're talking about, because these people are no longer famous to a lot of us. But they're well written enough that you can still understand what they're about. And what I love about the book is that the takeaways are so practical. They're very usable. It tells you to smile more. It tells you to understand that people's names are important. So I always try to make sure to spell people's names correctly, for instance, and to think in terms of the other person's interest. The example he gives in that one is, I think it's a pet or something that, your pet doesn't care about the stock market. Your pet doesn't care about all these things you care about. Your pet cares about getting fed twice a day on time with good, tasty food. You know what I mean?
Right.
So you want your pet to do something. You can't dangle a expensive stock certificate in front of them. That's not the metaphor he uses, but that's mine, since I can't remember the one he uses. But a lamb chop would do just fine to get your dog's attention, right? So when you are going after customers, well, what do they really want? And this goes, it's been translated more recently into what's their pain point. But I like, what do they really want? What is it they really are looking for? And then how does what you're giving them give that to them if it's not the exact same thing? A more recent book, there's two more recent books that have nothing to do with business or sales. One is called Catastrophe. It's by a British historian, I guess. And they did a documentary on it early on in the Secrets of the Dead series on PBS, to the point where you still can't get this version of the show on DVD. It's only was available on VHS. So it's about a climactic disaster that happened because something happened in the earth, and the climactic disaster caused all these changes throughout the whole world and helped overturn governments and helped start Islam, and just all these things happen that can be traced back to this major change and this major upheaval, and then the domino effect on all those things that happen. It's not exactly proven, but I'm convinced, even if other historians aren't, by what he said. And I think it's obvious that, sometimes something as prosaic as a volcano erupting can change the world, but very slowly and very subtly, and not just the people who are affected by it immediately, but by the climate changes, and the things that happen down the road.
Right.
And then another fun book I read, another nonfiction book I read, it's a few years old too, probably even older, called First Light. And it's just about the people who worked at some of the different observatories looking at astronomy, and just the images that Richard Preston uses, and the metaphors, and then the behind the scenes stories about these interesting characters. A really fun read. He's the one who also wrote The Hot Zone, which they tried to make into a movie but couldn't, and they made a movie similar to it, but there wasn't really takeoff on it. And The Hot Zone being, of course, about the Ebola crisis back in, I guess, the late 90s. So, but yeah, I love nonfiction. There's lots of good nonfiction out there.
Well, those are great recommendations.
Yeah. I think they're both still in print, I think.
So, I feel like they are. Yeah, for sure. I guess the other book that comes to mind, I wonder if you've read Jared Diamond's, any of his books.
I did. I read his big one, Guns, Germs, and Steel. I didn't like it as much as Catastrophe. I thought it was pretty good. And it explained a lot, especially the shape of
that's what reminded me of it.
Right. And they had him do a show, and then they realized pretty quickly that they shouldn't have him narrate the whole thing because he didn't have much personality. So they had a regular narrator hired, and they'd bring him in and ask him a few questions here and there. But they quickly realized that he's not going to be the main host. So I thought that was kind of funny. But there's other good books like How the Irish Saved Civilization. That's kind of interesting.
Oh, right.
These sort of world change books, and what can cause change, or what elements of change, or trying to read history through a different lens or whatever, and look at change and what causes it. And then it's not a book, although I suppose he wrote books about it. It was James Burke. He's a British television guy who did the Connections series, which was big in the late 70s, and then he did another series in the 80s. And those are still in print as far as the DVDs go. And I highly recommend watching them. They are fascinating. And he starts out with um, how did we get from whatever early event there was to the atomic bomb? And he traces all the, this helped lead to that, it led to that, led to that. And it's not a linear, this happened, then that, and then that happened thing. It's all the strange twists and turns and connections. You know, how did a cloud chamber lead to the atomic bomb?
Right.
I don't know if that's his first episode. The first episode is called The Trigger Effect, and it's really good. And it's about it sort of gives a quick rundown of what happened when the power went out in 1963 or 64 in New York City. And you know, and then what does that mean? And what does that lead to? And how do we, you gotta watch it. You owe it to yourself. Your library,
good.
if it's any
I'm
good,
gonna.
probably has it. So you don't have to
Okay.
buy it if you don't want to, but I think your local library should have it. It should have it.
Okay.
Or you can watch it online. Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably on
No,
Netflix. Yeah.
definitely. Well, speaking of non-linear, a part of the inspiration of learning to swim is about hopefully inspiring people to recognize or even be a little bit more adventuresome in their professional journey and recognizing that it's not always a straight line. So I like to ask folks who are guests, what was their very, very first job? So like the first thing that you did as a kid or a young person where it was transactional and that you got paid for a task, or, you know, or maybe if it was later on that you actually had a job that was ongoing.
Yeah, I think I know the first job where I got an actual paycheck was, and I'll mention that in a second. And that one is sadly prosaic and boring, but it's very typical. And that was when I was 14. But I think a few years before that, I didn't know, I was never a kid who did a lot of lawn mowing, but I think I might have done some yard work for somebody and got something in return. And you pulled some weeds or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time getting the specifics down on that, but I did that. And then there was an older lady, I think I cleaned up her yard, did a lot of work to her yard. And that might have happened before I got my first job, which was a friend of mine said, hey, you got to go work for McDonald's. I've got a job here. I'm getting paid. He's a buddy of mine in high school, you know,
Yeah.
and I might have been old enough to drive by that point. I think maybe I was a little bit older than 14. And so I'm like, okay, sure. And so I went and applied, and I got the job, of course, because they hired pretty much anybody with a heartbeat. They trained you a little bit, and you know, it was a miserable place to work. It was horrid.
Oh no.
It was so horrid. So with my first job, and I got it during the summer, and I kept it for, I want to say a month, but I'm not sure if I kept it for the whole month. Because I was a guy, they never put me up front. They only put the girls up front.
Okay.
to be cashiers. I'm like, why can't I be a cashier? Why do I have to like help unload the truck? Come here, come early. We got to help unload the truck. I'm like,
Right.
no. You know, catching these big giant boxes full of frozen meat coming down a little conveyor, you know. And, you know, you'd be walking around and the floors could be so greasy that I'm like, I don't know why we haven't fallen over and, you know,
Right.
hurt. And anyway, so it was, and then I had to help close, which is a load of cleanup. And you don't get home till 1 in the morning or 1:30 or 2. You know, we were never in danger in the job, and so a buddy of mine at church said, oh, I've been working for this guy named Dave. I'm doing painting for him. And it was like 15 cents an hour more than McDonald's. Mm-hmm. I was ready to go. And so I contacted Dave, and Dave's like, yeah, sure. And so I quit McDonald's, happiest day of my young life at that point, and went to work for $3.50 an hour instead of $3.35 an hour. And was laboring out in the hot sun doing the painting down below from the ground. It was an apartment building we were painting, and I had to get the rollers and paint as high as I could go with a kind of an extended pole. And then the guys would have the scaffolding that was attached to the top, and they would go up and do the upper levels. It was like a 3 or 4 story building. And I worked with a bunch of guys from El Salvador. One of them was from Cuba. The rest of them was from El Salvador. And they would say, you left too many holidays. A holiday is when the paint, a bubble pops and there's a little piece that didn't get painted.
Oh, okay.
You got to go over that again. Okay. Or you did a bad job on that. It was generally a decent group to work with, and I learned how to work a little harder and stuff. But And the guy who worked before me apparently didn't really work much. So I was a huge improvement over him. But they would take these huge siestas in the middle of the day because, they're from south of the border. And I'd hang out like, okay. And, you needed the rest because it was hot work. It was during
Right.
summer
Yeah.
outside in DC area. It's
Oh
85,
my God,
90,
it is
it's humid. Yeah.
steamy. Yeah.
Yeah. But, and then we'd go get something to eat, and then we'd chill for a while. And then we'd be back at it working again. And one of them was Cuban, and he spoke so fast that they couldn't understand him. They'd have to go, what? Because they didn't know. I didn't speak Spanish, but these guys didn't talk real fast even when they spoke Spanish. But this Cuban guy, whoa, he'd talk lightning fast. And so they'd have to go, I'm sorry, what did you say? I thought that was funny.
Oh my goodness.
So anyway, those are my first experiences, so.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
And so what would be one word to describe your professional journey?
Wow. I'm terrible at this. Even though I'm a word guy, I'm terrible at one word summaries. I really am. Varied.
Okay, I'll give you 3 words. How about
frustrating? I don't know. It just doesn't have to be positive, right? Frustrating. Endurance. Whatever. Just it's work. It's work. So.
Okay, well, maybe this will be easier. Is there a word that you could use to describe your personal life?
2 words, late bloomer. I mean, I got married quite late. I think I come to conclusions or I realize things, even though I feel like I grew up very mature for my age, I'm still very late on other things. And so I feel like in some ways I'm a late bloomer. In some ways I was a little old man when I was born. That's what my dad called me. But a late bloomer in some ways, which means good, means I'm blooming, right?
Exactly.
So,
Yeah. You know what? I'm a late bloomer. My kids were all late bloomers. And I used to tell them, and I still tell them because they're still young, it's like, you do not want to peak too early. We've got longevity in our genes. So
there you go. You'll be around for a lot of years. You can try a bunch of different
for
stuff.
A long time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just don't peak too early.
Here's another one I was thinking of last night without trying to sound too spiritual. Something, and I can't remember what it was, made me think of how old, maybe it was just talking to my daughter, who strikes me as an old soul. And I think I'm kind of an old soul. My wife and my son, they're teenagers. They're young souls. They're young spirits. And it doesn't mean us old souls can't get silly, because we can. But I get the feeling that my daughter is kind of an old soul, as am I. Wife, not so much. Son, definitely not an old soul. It's pretty funny. There's that kind of, it's sort of, how do you describe that? Well, are you really older? Who knows? But just, there's that feeling, of age
absolutely.
to somebody's interior, that you can sometimes guess at or can kind of sense from somebody.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, so we've talked about the fact that we've been in COVID now for a while, and we'll probably be in it for another while. And you work from home. And so kind of has there been kind of a hack or a trick or a tip that you might want to share for folks who, as we're kind of in for the long haul, would probably work from home, or maybe even a hybrid of things that you discovered in the process of this time?
Well, see, I had been in a BNI group with that past business. And then when I went into ghostwriting, I stayed in BNI. I changed my focus, because you're allowed to do that. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't really getting a ton of traction. I did a bunch of people's websites, but it wasn't really what I was looking for. I did web copy for them. Mm-hmm. So I quit. And I did a networking group I would go to every once in a while. And they were an hour and a half away, an hour and 15 minutes away. So event with them meant getting up fairly early, which is fine. Mm-hmm. But getting down there, doing the group, hanging out, because I want to make it worth my while. Right. And then coming home and my day is shot and I don't have any energy left. So the one hack that I'm not alone in discovering is being able to network or talk to people online and having meaningful conversations over Zoom, and both of those things, both joining networking groups as well as just connecting with people and talking to them over Zoom. And I I know it existed before the pandemic, but I think it's gotten more popular, and I certainly wasn't as aware of the option, And I think Zoom is
Yeah.
still a fairly new company, even at that. So it
Oh
came along
yeah,
kind of at
because
the right time, I think. It was sort of fortuitous that we had Zoom,
right.
show up. But
Yeah, because I had been using Zoom before the pandemic with some of my out of state clients, um and I know that there was a while there that I was using Skype.
mhm.
But
I never
I
felt like
do.
Skype was easy to use. I don't know why. It felt
No,
clunky. Yeah.
I didn't either. So, Zoom, I don't know how much, if I just wasn't aware of Zoom, or all of a sudden it was like Zoom was this much easier platform. So, and I think they've just gotten better. So
Yeah.
kudos to them
Yeah, exactly.
for being adaptable.
Being there.
So I want to, let's see,
I've
the
got a
other thing
meeting
that,
in I got a meeting in 10 minutes. Hopefully that doesn't
okay.
wrinkle
No.
anything.
So
Okay.
I have two more questions for you.
Sure.
So, what would be kind of an in plain sight talent that you have? What's something that if I went around and talked to all those folks who know you, they'd be like, oh, yeah, Jonathan, he's so great at this.
At words, yeah, it putting the phrase the best way possible. The obvious
Yeah.
stuff as far as the writing or even spoken.
Okay.
He's good at talking too. Yeah.
And then what is your more hidden talent? What is something that's maybe not necessarily that apparent to
Mm,
folks?
yeah. Um, I guess getting insights about people, because that's not something that's really obvious.
Hmm.
Being able to see through people in a sense, or be able to hopefully be a decent judge of character. No one's perfect at that, but I think that's something, the kind of seeing through people, seeing through world events, seeing through whatever, getting insights, getting deeper insights. And that you'll get if you get to know me better, and it's not super hidden, but it's not apparent from a first meeting, probably.
Right. Okay. Oh, last question.
Oh yeah.
What's your what does a meaningful life look like to you?
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to a friend of mine years ago, and he said, my dad has lived the American dream because he had a good, successful job. He had a family. He had a decent sized house. He had friends. He had people who respected him. Whatever. He got to do a few things. And my friend didn't feel like he was going to measure up to his dad. And then sadly, in a lot of ways he didn't, but he has some challenges that I think prevented that. And I've looked at his dad's life and thought, I would like to have a life kind of like that. To me, that's a successful life. It's quote unquote the American dream, where you've got a little bit of success in this area, a little bit of success in that area. You've got some success in that area. So it's not just about money. It's not just about family. It's not just about possessions. It's kind of all the above, and some experiences there too. And friends, and but also leaving behind. He wrote some interesting things that he left behind. Nothing was ever a bestseller or anything like that, but he influenced those around him with his thoughts. So it's kind of all of the above. So I'd like to live a life a lot like my friend's father, quote unquote, the American dream in a sense. Very
Mm.
traditional, but also, some of those added spiritual or intellectual things.
Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for being a guest today. It's a
Thank you, Kristan. This was
pleasure.
fun.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. And I look forward to hearing more from you. And we will have Jonathan's contact information in the show notes, so to speak. And we
If you ever
will,
need another interview again about something different, feel free. This was fun.
oh, thank you so much. Okay, take care.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Our goal is to inspire others and share stories to find meaning in your daily life. Let go of the traditional norms and be yourself at home, work, and beyond. The awareness of bright spots and blind spots is a performance-enhancing tool that you can apply to your life and to your organization today.